Welcome, my friends. I'm glad you guys decided to come and join us for this in-depth look at this very blessed artist that we are ever so blessed to get to interview today, Miss Jeannette Mamie Gagnon. She is a very well-known Haida carver as well as Haida artist, and this is her little companion, Daisy, the one and only. So don't be surprised if she puts in her 2 cents too while we're carrying on. And today we're going to be asking a lot of questions. So hopefully you're going to be comfortable with this. So, what we're going to be touching on is what brought you to the situation you're living in now, how you're doing in life, any addiction problems you've had, any emotional problems, and you were also scooped in the 60s, weren't you, by
Yes.
the ministry?
Yeah.
You want to tell me a little bit about that and introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Jeanette. I'm from Haida. I was born there. I was scooped when I was 8 or 9 years old, taken from Haida, used to be the Queen Charlotte Islands. They moved me over to Prince Rupert, and they put me into a receiving home. They put you there before they put you in with a home and a family. And they just kind of prep you and get you used to being around other people and um, just generally teach you what you're allowed to do, what you're not allowed to do. And yeah,
So, were you the only one in your family who was scooped in that 60s scoop? How many siblings do you have? Let's start with that.
okay. Wow, there are 7 of us. Um, I was taken over to the mainland and I was taking care of a few of my brothers and sisters, and uh, my grandparents, or none of my aunts or any of them, could take care of all of us because of my mother and father's alcoholism at that time in their lives. My grandmother was already taking care of all of her children. She has 8 children, and she was looking after a bunch of the grandchildren.
So, how old were you at the time they came and scooped you?
I think I was 8 years old.
8?
Yeah,
Okay. And at that time, were all your siblings still left behind, or like all your brothers and sisters?
yeah. And I happened to be there for a couple of days, and while they were getting me ready to go, and they were processing me through the RCMP office and everything, and doing the tickets through the airplane, and there were 4 or 5 of us at that time that all had to be divvied out in the community. My grandmother took my youngest sister, Sandy, um, my mother's boyfriend at the time, her and him took 2 of my other siblings. My oldest brother, he got um, accepted by my great grandparents and their son and their and his sons. So there's a lot of ancestors there. They raised him, and I never learned Haida, and he did because he was left behind there.
So up until
Yeah.
8 years old, were you the main influencer for your younger brothers and sisters? You're the oldest, are you not?
Yeah.
So were you the main, sort of say, because you said your parents were into alcoholism and I'm
Yeah.
sure busy out with their jobs or whatever they had to do. So did that leave you in charge of raising your brothers and sisters?
Yeah, I would say so. I'd have to get us all dressed in the morning for school, and let me tell you some funny stories about that one. And have to cook for them and clean the house and look for clean clothes or do some laundry myself and generally take care of the kids.
Sorry, I asked you that. Were you the only one taken
Yeah.
by the school? So, what do you know what happened then after you mentioned a couple of them had got split up? Were all of the children split up, like all your brothers and sisters, or were there still a good number of them staying?
No, they were all taken. All of us were taken from my mom and dad. Um,
That must not have been easy.
no.
Um,
Uh,
did you find that the foster family you were first, how many foster families did you have to start with?
I lived with two families, one in Prince Rupert and one in Port Edward,
Oh,
and the receiving home. I went into that a couple of times between the homes.
so this is three different locations then you were at. And how long did that last for?
Do you mean how long was I taken for?
Yeah.
Well, I was taken for like 7 years. They let me go home when I was 15.
So from 8 to 15.
Yeah.
How do you figure that affected you? Did you get introduced into drugs or alcoholism before you went into foster care, or did you start experimenting then? Did you even experiment in your teens or preteens?
Not in my preteens, but when I was about 13, I went over to my girlfriend's New Year's Eve, and they were having a great big New Year's Eve bash, and I got into the wine. I got
And how old were you at
really
this
drunk.
time?
I was about 13.
And you were just on a visit at that time home.
I was living at that home in Fort Edward. Yeah.
Oh, and then they were having the party and you're able to
Go
sneak
to,
some then, or
yeah.
was somebody trying to like push the alcohol on you,
No,
or
no, nobody knew about it. I was very sneaky. The party was upstairs and the children were all downstairs. And I would just go up the stairs and sneak some down. They didn't
were
find
you
out
the only
until
one
the end of the
using it,
night.
or were there a couple of you sharing on it, or how did that go? Do you remember?
No, I think I might have been the only one.
Oh, goodness.
That's
The
really
trouble
bad.
we like to get into when we're experimenting
Yeah,
as teens. I
they had to
know
carry me
from
home.
I know from previous experiences with myself that when I went through that separation from home and being in foster home or group homes, that I'd found a lot of barriers were easier to break, like for indulging in smoking of marijuana or alcohol or anything for that matter. So I can totally understand where you're coming from with that
Mm-hmm.
one, and feeling like a lot could be missing. I'm guessing is where you're coming from, not having your family. If there was eight of you, seven
Yeah,
or eight,
7 of us.
seven of you, and that would be a big void in your heart, right? For one day you're taking care of all your kins and siblings and being needed, being like that primary rock in the family, and then the very next you're
Yeah,
just um sorry the pun, but a redheaded stepchild. You're in a foreign place with a foreign family, and how did that affect you? Like, were you accepted warmly there, or were they rough on you because of your heritage?
both families, they were pretty gentle with me because I was really upset. being taken from my family and having absolutely nobody at all that I was related to. And at that time, when I was first taken and I was in Rupert, there were no Native children at that time in my school or around the community that I noticed. Because I remember going to the community or the movie theater, and I'd be sitting there, and all these children are just staring at me like I was the movie because the color
Oh,
of my
because you were the
skin.
native child
Yeah,
there and you're in a white community.
yeah.
So, with finding you're being brought up in that kind of an atmosphere where Prince Rupert is and Port Ed's, that's not very far. That's only about 11 kilometers and maybe about 7 miles apart, right? But at that time, was there a bus that could go back and forth, or how was it? Where were you finding yourself going to school
Mm,
from your first? Where was your first home located? Is that the one in Prince Rupert?
yeah.
Okay, like what did you do for schooling then? Did you get forced in residential school or like a public school or a
No, it
church?
was a public school, an elementary school in Prince Rupert, and then I went to a high school when I moved out to Port Edward with the second family.
And how long were you with that first family?
Uh, see, from 9 to about 11, so almost 3, 4 years.
Did you find when you were taken away from your family, did you find any kind of a resentment building within yourself, like for either ministry or your family feeling like maybe they betrayed you by giving you up? Like think back to that point in time, or was there a point in time where you were so tired of having to take care of your family that you wanted to get away on somehow? Or tell me a little bit more that you remember about that point in time.
Well, I remember even before the ministry took me, um, I'd go to the ferry, I think it was the Northland Prince. It was a great big ship that would bring all the groceries and everything else into Massa. And I found the captain and I'd asked him if he would take me to Vancouver so I could live down there and make my way down there because I just couldn't handle it anymore. Not really. Like having a family, taking care of them, and being like a mother to all my siblings. That was really, really hard on me, and I just wanted to be free and escape all of that. And the fella there, he was really concerned about me because it was a ship just filled with men, and he was scared that they might do something bad to me. So
And how old were you at that time?
I was only about 7.5, 8.
Really?
Yeah,
So
maybe.
what would there have been in Vancouver for you at that time?
I have no idea. I just wanted to get away that bad.
Really, eh?
Yeah.
So they luckily didn't bring you to Van, did they?
Yeah,
Or is that
no,
how
no,
you
thank
got
God.
separated?
It wasn't too long after that that the ministry took me. But even when I was with my mom and dad there before they took me, I was running away at least once or twice a week. I'd go to our principal's home. They were always really kind to me, and they knew all about our living situation and how the parents were and everything like that. So they'd bring me into their home and they'd give me a sandwich or ice cream cone or something just to get my mind off of the worries and everything that I had concerning my family and the things that were happening.
So up until 8 years old then, what kind of influencers were there around you that played a part in your development and your character building and showing you right from wrong and how to properly be that carried for your siblings?
I don't even know. Because even when I was that young, I was babysitting my cousins, and they were just like 1 and 2 years old, and one would be a baby. And
So you had a lot of responsibilities on
Yeah,
you then, didn't you?
yeah.
Yeah, that's insane.
Yeah, I used to bath them, feed them. It was like I was a parent, even from the time I was a little,
Yeah, I
little
kind of picked up that by
grade
what
one
you
or
were saying,
two.
by all the pressures put on you with the younger siblings. And it's a shame. It seems to be that that is a big um, part that gets played in being brought up on a reserve. I know that usually the oldest sibling finds themselves to become responsible for a lot of their younger siblings to be the rock of their more or less um,
The
leadership,
substitute parent.
because parents are dealing with their own things if they're not out fishing and stuff for a living, or out where they have to be
Logging.
gone all hours. Maybe they have an addiction problem. Like there's big statistics that go on talking about how much alcoholism really runs amok on reservations. So it's very common that the first child gets dropped with pretty well the substitute parental responsibilities. So I think you've done great for yourself. And okay, so as I was asking you now, with your influencers that were around you and showing you right from wrong, where did that put your moral compass before going into ministry as well as dealing with it?
Well, I had a pastor. I had a few preachers in my life as a child, and I had my grandmother. My grandfather played the organ in the Anglican church there in Haida, and my grandmother dressed us all up and put our little shoes on and our little white gloves and take us off to church to listen to our grandfather playing the organ for everyone. And then after that was over, if we were good, our grandmother let us go to the Pentecostal um, Sunday schools that they had in people's homes at that time, because they didn't really have any. Well, the Pentecostals didn't have a church, so it was all house services and Sunday school and everything in people's homes.
So, how was your moral compass then?
I had all the pastors and the preachers talking to me, and I had my grandmother. She'd watch me, and just what I'd learned from going to Sunday school and church. She looked to me for some answers when I was a child, too. I don't know why. And I'm not sure if I gave her the right answers to some of her questions because they were like life changing for others in our family.
So, what kind of habits did you find yourself forming? Even with all that in your life, the pastor's teaching you, did you find any way to support you and your younger siblings, or what did you have to do to meet the need that was there?
My mom and dad, the thing they did was the groceries. There was always lots of groceries. My dad had, there were 11 siblings in his family. So I guess there wasn't much food at all for them. It was like back in the 30s and the 40s. He lost seven of his siblings back in those days. And there wasn't much food. So after the war was over, he met my mother on the island. He always made sure there was tons of food in the pantry. So we never had to worry about anything like that.
How about clothing? Did you guys always have enough clothing and to meet the need and to make it to school?
We didn't have a lot of nice clothes or anything that I can testify to. I know. I remember my grandmother sitting up 10 o'clock at night, 10:30 at night, uh, making underwear for the girls out of bed sheets or pillowcases that she had in her room. 50s and stuff. So you did what you had to because in those days everybody had great big families that you had to take care of and support. I remember at one point I counted, there were 20 of us living in my grandmother and grandfather's house at one point. We were all very young. I've always been around, always had lots of siblings, lots of family around. So it was really hard when the welfare took me.
Being in ministry and separated from family.
I didn't
So,
have anyone.
so at 15 then, why don't you give us a little insight into how you ended up making it back home after, and then how that affected you?
When I was 15, they asked me if I wanted to go home to visit my family. So I said, sure. I jumped at the chance to go home and visit my family. So we got over there, and I'd been visiting for about a week or 2 weeks. For some reason, out of the blue, the social services asked me if I wanted to stay at home. They taught me all that they could, and with my family, with everything that I'd learned at the schools and with the families that I'd been with. So I did go home and kind of had to visit here and visit there to catch up with the rest of my siblings because we were all scattered when the 60s scoop happened.
Well, I think we're pretty well going to wrap up part one of this series there. Be sure to come back and continue on. Want to give us a little insight just on what they're going to have to look forward to on our next sitting?
Tell you about how I got into the art world. I started my career in that when I was 15, which was a very good thing because I was on my own. I didn't have a family to live with at that time because my mother was living with this guy in a tiny little trailer.
And how about your own family? You started your own family, didn't you? You had 4 children
Yeah.
and you're married still, right?
Yeah.
As well as now you're clean, a very well known artist. And I'm sure you'll give us a little insight into some of your battles that ended you up homeless
Yeah.
and what brought you through that and your alcoholism, too. So, with that, make sure you guys like, comment, and subscribe. If you guys have any questions you'd care to ask Jeannette Mimi Gagnon, be sure to leave it in the comments below. And we'll get back to all the early commenters as well as for our next sit down and recording. We'll look through there to try and find a couple of the questions from the viewers to see if there's anything they'd like to get insight about. As well as on part two, you can look forward to seeing some of her beautiful displayed artworks, maybe some of her argillite, as well as her beaded artwork, Devil's Club artwork, and medicines. So with that, we thank you for joining us,
Yes.
and